You might be surprised to learn this, but frogs are one of the most ancient creatures known to man. They have been around since the time of dinosaurs, and while dinosaurs have long since disappeared, frogs continue to roam the earth. For over 190 million years, frogs have adapted and evolved with every challenge nature has put to them. They can be found in a variety of environments and climates, from the hot desert to the cold Arctic. The earliest known frog appeared during the late Jurassic period, about 190 million years ago. Scientists believe that the oldest frogs developed jumping legs to avoid being eaten by small dinosaurs. Fossils of these frogs have been found on Navajo Indian reservations in Arizona in the United States. Frogs are amphibians, which means that although they spend time on land, they must breed and develop into an adult in water. Like all amphibians, frogs are cold-blooded. This means that their body temperature changes with the temperature of their surroundings. When the temperature gets colder in the winter months, some frogs go into hibernation. They bury themselves in the mud at the bottom of a pond or in an underground burrow and fall into a deep sleep, waking only when spring arrives. Many people do not understand the difference between a frog and a toad. The most significant difference is that a toad walks, but a frog jumps. Also, the skin of frogs is usually moist and slimy, whereas a toad is dry and warty. If you came across a group of frogs, you would call it an army, but a group of toads is called a knot. Most frogs lay thousands of eggs in the water and then abandon them, leaving them to fend for themselves. Frogs need to lay as many eggs as possible in order to ensure that a few offspring survive the risky journey from egg to tadpole to adult frog. Lying unattended in the water, frog eggs are a tasty delicacy for some predators. Some frogs have developed into more protective parents. The marsupial frog keeps her eggs in a pouch like a kangaroo. In Australia, the gastric brooding frog swallows her fertilized eggs, keeping them in her stomach for up to 8 weeks until they hop out of her mouth as little frogs. Among Darwin frogs, it is the male who swallows and stores the offspring in his vocal sac. Frogs tend to lay their eggs as one large mass in calm, still waters of lakes, ponds, or rivers. A spawn of frog eggs looks a little like tapioca pudding, although probably not as tasty. Anywhere between 3 days to 25 days after they are laid, the frog eggs will begin to hatch. Most frog eggs do not hatch into frogs, but into fish-like tadpoles, complete with gills and a tail. The tadpole stage of a frog's development is the most fragile. The tadpole's main concern is to eat as much food as possible in order to fuel its change or metamorphosis into an adult frog. Tadpoles are known for their voracious appetite, eating everything including algae, plants, decaying animals, and sometimes even frog eggs or other tadpoles. After about 4 weeks, skin will start to grow over the tadpole's gills. The gills will eventually disappear. At this point, the tadpole begins to develop a more complex digestive system, as well as tiny teeth to help them break down and digest the enormous amounts of food they will consume. Tadpoles are known to be fairly social creatures. Some even interact and school like fish. After about 6 to 9 weeks, the tadpole will begin to sprout tiny legs and arms. As its gills become completely covered, lungs will have developed to allow it to breathe air. The head of the tadpole becomes more distinct, and as its body elongates, it will begin to resemble a tiny frog with a really long tail. Next, a strange thing will occur. The tadpole will begin to eat its own tail. Actually, so much energy is required to complete the growing process that a tadpole will absorb the protein and nutrients stored in its tail. As the tail begins to shrink, the tadpole metamorphoses into a young frog or froglet. By 12 weeks, its tail will have shrunk to a tiny stub and it will be ready to leave the water. Some species that breed in temporary ponds may develop more quickly than this, for if the pond dries up too soon, the underdeveloped tadpoles will not survive. Frogs that live in higher altitudes or in colder places might take a lot longer to complete the tadpole stage because the colder temperature slows down the growing process. Once the frog has developed and left the water, it will spend most of its time on the land. Of course, it will return to the water when it is ready to lay its own eggs and begin the frog life cycle again. There are over 3,000 species of frogs in the world. They can be found in a variety of environments from extreme heat to extreme cold. With different environments come different types of predators. Fortunately, each frog is adapted to protect itself in its particular environment. One of the frog's greatest defense tools is its adaptability. With their webbed feet, frogs can easily escape predators both in the water and on land. And their various skin colors allow them to blend into almost any environment. This is called camouflage. For example, the Solomon Island leaf frog has both the color and pointed shape of dry leaves, making them virtually impossible to find on leaf-covered ground. If a predator does happen to find a frog in hiding, it will find what it thinks is a dead frog. That's because most frogs will pretend to be dead when they're attacked. This is helpful because most predators will only eat live prey. The sneakiest colored frog is most certainly the Chilean four-eyed frog. It has a bright pair of spots on its backside that look like enormous eyes. When seated, the frog's thighs conceal these eye spots. However, when a predator approaches, the frog lowers its head and lifts its backside, creating the illusion of a much larger and more intimidating frog. Some frogs can even change their color like a chameleon, according to light, temperature, humidity, or even their mood. For example, the African frog is normally dark green in color, but turns white in the heat of the day to reflect the heat and keep cool. Some frogs are able to change color to reflect their environment by lightening or darkening their skin to match surrounding leaves. Color changes like this are created by special pigment cells called chromatophores. Inside these tiny cells, grains of pigment cause color change by shifting their distribution. When the pigments are packed tightly together, the frog is light-colored. When the pigment grains spread out, the frog's color darkens. Of course, not all frogs use their color to blend into their surroundings. Some frogs, like the poison arrow frog, found in tropical rainforests, are wildly colored with bright yellows, reds, oranges, and blues. Oftentimes, they are covered with bold patterns or stripes. These bright colors serve as a warning to predators that these frogs are poisonous. Interestingly enough, some non-poisonous frogs have adopted the colors of poison arrow frogs to trick predators into thinking that they are poisonous. Poisonous frogs have poison glands in their skin that release a toxic chemical when they are attacked. These are called parotoid glands. When a toad is threatened, a milky poisonous fluid oozes from the gland. This fluid can cause a burning sensation in the eyes and mouths of most predators. Some frogs have poison strong enough to cause muscle spasms, heartbeat irregularities, and respiratory problems. However, what is a frog to do when the camouflage fails? When playing dead doesn't work? Or when it doesn't have poisonous glands? Some frogs rely on intimidation to scare the predator for long enough to escape. The tomato frog of Madagascar puffs itself up like a balloon, making it appear too big to swallow. Other frogs will huff, puff, croak, scream, and grunt to ward off dangerous predators, or they may just quickly hop away. You might be surprised. Frogs eat an incredible amount of food. From the moment they are hatched as tadpoles to the later stages of their adult life, frogs will eat just about anything they can get their sticky tongues on. Insects, snails, spiders, worms, small fish, and even other frogs. The ornate horned frog of Argentina can swallow a whole mouse in one mouthful. Frogs will only eat prey that are still alive. Even if they come across a large, dead snake, frogs will not eat it. Frogs are picky eaters. All frogs swallow their prey whole. If a frog does have teeth, they are usually only on the upper jaw and are used for holding on to prey, not biting or chewing. Some frogs catch insects with a long, sticky tongue. Within a split second, a frog can shoot out its tongue, attach it to the insect, and roll it back into its mouth. Frogs close their eyes as they shoot their tongues at prey. This means that a frog has to carefully line up the shot before it can strike, since it will not be able to see during the actual strike. A frog's eyes also have an important secondary function. As a frog swallows its prey, its eyes will sink through an opening in the skull to help force the food down the throat. Although most frogs are carnivores, there are some frogs that are herbivores. For example, Brazilian tree frogs eat brightly colored fruits and then later excrete the seeds. Not only do they have a delicious meal, but they also help to disperse the seeds throughout the forest. This ensures that there are plenty of fruit trees growing throughout the rainforest. If a frog ever eats something that is poisonous or likely to cause it some trouble, they can throw out their entire stomach. That means that the frog's stomach will actually protrude through their mouth. The frog can then use its right front leg to wipe the stomach and get rid of whatever nasty, tasty material they have just swallowed. Frogs are known to be some of nature's greatest communicators. Many consider them great singers or musicians, but there is much more to their natural singing talents. Frogs use their singing or croaking for a variety of reasons. They sing to mark their territory, to announce changes in the weather, when they are frightened or hurt, or when they are trying to attract a mate. Frogs have two pouches of skin called vocal sacs that push air across their vocal cords and produce the interesting sounds. The vocal sacs work like echo chambers that amplify the sound. The size of frog will determine the frequency at which the sound is sent out. Larger frogs create sounds that are deeper and louder. Certain species of frogs may call at a certain private frequency that is not used by other nearby frogs. By sending their call within a separate sound range, their calls can be heard over the calls of other frogs. Frogs' ears, called tympanum, look like two flat circles behind the eyes. The size of the tympanum and the distance between them determine which sounds a frog will hear best. In this way, frogs' ears are tuned to hear the calls of their own species best. This helps the females to identify and locate the males of her species. Not an easy task in a noisy pond packed with all kinds of frogs and toads. Generally, it is the male frogs that serenade female frogs to interest them in mating. However, the South African clawed frog indicates her interest in a suitor with loud clicks. Now as a frog swallows its prey, the food passes from the mouth to the stomach by way of the esophagus. The stomach is a storage sac for food and can stretch to accommodate how much food a frog eats. The stomach is also the first step in a frog's digestion. Stomach enzymes and acids mix, breaking the food into smaller particles called chyme. Stomach acid is so strong that it can dissolve a hole through a solid wood table. However, it won't dissolve a hole through the stomach because cells in the stomach lining ooze mucus that neutralizes the acid upon contact. From the stomach, the food continues to the small intestine where the rest of the digestion process will occur. The small intestine is the lower part of the digestive system connecting the stomach to the large intestine. The small intestine is responsible for the absorption of digested nutrients and is divided into two portions. The first straight portion of the small intestine is called the duodenum, and the curled portion is called the ileum. A membrane called the mesentery holds the ileum together. The blood vessels running through the mesentery carrying absorbed nutrients away from the intestine to the rest of the body. The large intestine is connected to the small intestine and is much larger and wider. In the frog, the large intestine leads to an opening called the cloaca, meaning sewer. The cloaca is the last stop before waste, sperm, or urine exit the frog's body. The bladder is the organ responsible for producing enzymes to assist in digestion. It works along with the stomach and intestines to break down and digest food. Interestingly, the frog is also able to use its urinary bladder to aid water conservation. When the frog is in water, its bladder quickly fills up with dilute urine. Later, when the frog is on land, this water is reabsorbed into the blood. This process helps to replace water lost by evaporation through the skin. Fat bodies are bright orange or yellow spaghetti-shaped structures that are located just on the inside of the abdominal wall. Frogs store fat inside fat bodies, and depending on the size of the fat bodies, you can determine whether or not the frog lived in a food-rich habitat. If the fat bodies are large and plush, this means that the frog probably lived in an environment that provided lots of food. This stored fat can be turned into energy whenever the frog may need it. For example, during hibernation, a frog will use this stored energy in order to survive the winter months. The adrenal body is a gland perched upon the kidney, which produces a chemical called epinephrine, or, as it is commonly known as, adrenaline. It is composed of two glandular portions, an outer cortex and a central medulla. The outer cortex responds to signals of stress and affects the salt and water balance. The central medulla responds to nervous inputs in reacting to stress and releases the adrenaline. The frog has a highly developed central nervous center that consists of a brain, a spinal cord, and nerves. The different parts of a frog's brain control different parts of its body. There are four main parts to a brain. The cerebrum is the frog's thinking center and the part of the brain that helps the frog respond to its environment. Next to the cerebrum are the optic lobes, which are for vision. Behind the optic lobes is the cerebellum, which is used to coordinate the frog's muscles and maintain its balance. Next to the cerebellum is the medulla oblongata, which connects the brain to the spinal cord and controls internal functions by relaying nerve signals between the brain and spinal cord. The frog's heart is the only organ contained within the coelom, which has its own protective covering. There are two upper chambers of the heart, the right atrium and the left atrium. In man, the lower heart chamber is divided into two compartments, the right ventricle and the left ventricle. However, the frog's heart has only one lower chamber, a single ventricle. The heart is a muscle, probably the most important muscle in the body. Its job is to pump oxygen-rich blood throughout the entire body. The heart, along with the arteries and veins, is called the circulatory system. Although frogs breathe oxygen through their skin, they also have a pair of simple sac-like lungs. Just like humans, oxygen enters the body through two nostrils, passes through the windpipe, and is received by the lungs. However, unlike humans, the frog has no ribs or diaphragm, and its chest muscles are involved in breathing. A frog may also breathe in through its mouth. The floor of the mouth is lowered, causing the frog's throat to puff out. When the nostrils open, air enters the enlarged mouth. Then, with nostrils closed, the air in the mouth is forced into the lungs by contraction of the floor of the mouth. A frog's skin is crucial to its survival. Not only do they absorb oxygen through their skin, they also drink through it. Frogs don't swallow water like humans or other animals. Instead, they rely on their skin to get all the moisture they need. And although frogs have lungs, they also depend on the extra oxygen that is absorbed through their skin, especially when they are underwater. The process by which a frog absorbs water through its skin is called osmosis. If a frog can't absorb enough oxygen, it will suffocate. A frog will shed its skin about once a week. Besides needing extremely fast reflexes to catch prey, a frog also needs good eyesight. A frog's large eyes can see a wide range of colors and can also see well in dim light. The bulging eyes of a frog can see in almost any direction, 180 degrees, without having to move their head. With the eyes positioned on top of the head, the frog can sit in the water with only its eyes and nose visible above the surface. Some frogs also have a third eyelid called a nictitating membrane, which may be drawn across the eye to protect it. Okay, legs are not really organs, but they are important parts of a frog's anatomy. Frogs are known to be one of the best jumpers on the planet. Some frogs can launch themselves over 20 times their own body length with their powerful legs. Aquatic frogs are likely to have long, strong legs to help them swim, whereas frogs that spend their time in trees have round toe pads on their feet that helps them cling to branches. Different frogs have developed different characteristics depending on their specific needs of their environment. For example, spadefoot frogs have a horn-like growth on their hind legs, which help them to dig burrows in the soil where they live. The Costa Rican flying tree frog soars from branch to branch by using the web-like folds of skin between its toes like a parachute. The frog uses its long tongue to catch its prey. Unlike humans, the frog's tongue is attached to the front of the mouth instead of the rear. The tongue is also covered with a sticky substance, which helps it to snatch and hold insects. Normally, the tip of a frog's tongue is folded backward towards the throat. From this position, the frog can flick it out rapidly to grasp any passing prey. Frogs are incredibly interesting animals to study. One of the best things about frogs is that they can be found in almost every region of the Earth. That means that it is even possible for you to organize a frog-watching expedition in areas close to your home. The first thing to understand about frog watching is that it is completely different than any other conservation observations like bird watching. Bird watchers hope for a bright, warm day that will encourage the birds out of hiding. Frog watchers, on the other hand, hope for a wet, cool, overcast night that is the perfect environment for frogs. Also, Instead of searching the meadows and flowering fields, a frog watcher searches swamps, marshes, and woodland ponds. Most frogs are nocturnal creatures, so the best time to search for them is at night. As well, they are more likely to be found during the pre-hibernation period of autumn and post-hibernation period of spring. Remember, they will be hibernating through the long, cold winter months. Found in the rainforest of South and Central America, the poison arrow frog is one of the most beautiful and deadly frogs known to man. Measuring only about an inch or two in length, the poison arrow frog can be found colored in bright red, green, blue, or yellow. Although this bright coloration might make them easier to spot against the dark brown rainforest floor, their skin color warns potential predators that they are extremely poisonous. The glands of their skin release a deadly poison that can cause paralysis or even death to humans. The poison protects them from harmful predators. The poisonous chemicals emitted by the glands of the poison arrow frog are Phyllobates erytanea, Phyllobates bicolor, and Phyllobates terribilis. The most toxic, Phyllobates terribilis, is extremely deadly when touched. The poison arrow frog requires more moisture than regular frogs, so they prefer to live in wet, tropical areas like the Amazon rainforest. Because of the constant, warm weather found in rainforests, the poison arrow frog has no need to migrate or hibernate. They can spend their lives living under the cover of tropical plants and feeding on small creatures such as ants, termites, flies, small beetles, and spiders. The poison arrow frog has one of the most unique mating rituals. Before the male and female frogs mate, they will jump around and play with each other. Also, unlike many other amphibians, the poison arrow frog does not lay a large spawn of eggs directly in the water. Instead, it lays only a few eggs, which the male carries around on his back. When the eggs mature into tadpoles, they leave their father's back and make it freely into the water to continue their growing process. The most outstanding characteristic of this amphibian is its bright red eyes. They might be beautiful to look at, but for the frog, they also serve an important purpose. Red-eyed tree frogs are nocturnal, meaning they only come out at night to climb and hunt for their food. While they are sleeping during the day with their eyes closed, they blend in with their surroundings. But if a predator starts to bother the frog, they can just open those huge, bright eyes and scare it away. The red-eyed tree frog inhabits South America and most of Central America. They live in neotropical environments and prefer the lowland rainforest areas close to the rivers and adjacent hills. As their name might suggest, tree frogs spend most of their time in trees. They have feet like suction cups, which helps them attach to leaves, branches, and trunks of trees. Measuring only about 2 inches in length, male tree frogs are usually smaller than female tree frogs. This can make for some interesting mating practices. Red-eyed tree frogs have a very musical mating ritual. The males will croak out a song to attract the females. The croaking male will then jump from leaf to leaf in order to establish a territory. Should any other male frogs make a challenge for the attention of the female frog, the males will face off in a croaking song competition. As the female tree frog emerges from hiding, the males will try to jump on her back and fight for the best position to hang on. The female will have to carry more than one male for days until all the males have fallen off but one. The last surviving tree frog is then able to mate with the female. North American bullfrogs are the largest true frog found in North America, weighing up to ½ kilogram and 20 centimeters in length. Being this big means that bullfrogs have voracious appetites. Bullfrogs are predators and will eat just about anything that will fit into their mouth. Insects, mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, and even turtles. The bullfrog can be found throughout North America, from Nova Scotia to Florida and as far west as California and parts of Mexico. As cold-blooded amphibians, the North American bullfrog prefers warm weather and will hibernate during the cold winter months. It may bury itself in the mud or a small cave-like structure. As the frog's body temperature begins to fall, it will go into a deep sleep. This will allow the frog to conserve energy and survive the harsh winter weather. The following spring, it will awake from its slumber and begin its search for a female mate. The bullfrog spends most of its time in the water, so they can usually be found near lakes, ponds, or rivers. Water plays an important part of the bullfrog's reproduction process, as the fertilization of their eggs is done externally. The female will deposit as many as 20,000 eggs in a foamy film in quiet, still waters, sometimes allowing more than one male to fertilize the eggs. The development of the bullfrog tadpole is much slower than other frogs. A bullfrog tadpole might stay in the water for up to 3 years before it fully develops into a full-grown adult frog. The North American bullfrog are also known for their powerful hind legs, which allows them to leap up to 6 feet. Their strength also helps them to protect their territory from other aggressive frogs, as they all compete for the female's attention. Females are attracted to males who have territories that provide the most food. The horned frog is native to South America, where it is surrounded by myth and folklore. For generations, tales have been told about its ferocity and aggression. Stories are told about its dangerous bite, which could kill a cow or horse, or sever a person's finger. Although the jaw action of this predatory frog is both disconcerting and uncomfortable, many of these stories have been greatly exaggerated. The truth is that these frogs have perfected the techniques of bluff and aggression to ward off potential predators. Horned frogs huff, puff, open their huge mouth in threat, and jump forward and bite. The horn of the horned frog is a triangular flap of skin on the edge of the upper eyelid. It is not hard or sharp, as it is merely a flap of skin. However, it makes the head of the horned frog appear wider and might discourage any potential predators from attacking. They can also be found in an array of colors, from various dark browns to light greens and yellows. Male horned frogs can reach a length of 6 inches, but the female, which is the larger of the two, can reach a length of 8 inches. Like many other frogs, the horned frog is nocturnal and does most of its hunting during the night. Because of their size, they tend not to move around very much. Instead, they prefer to lie in ambush for any unsuspecting snakes, lizards, mice, or insects that might wander by. Once the shedding starts, the frog will eat its own skin. Frogs are incredibly interesting. Frogs are Make sure you are well prepared on your frog watching expeditions. Since most frogs are likely to be found near rivers, swamps, or ponds, it's important that you dress appropriately. Be sure to wear rubber boots and clothing that will protect you from mosquitoes and bugs and the water. You'll also need flashlights, a notepad, a pen, and a camera. Make sure you're not too loud because the only way you'll be able to track the frogs is by listening and following their vocal calls or singing. If you decide that you'd like to keep a frog as a pet, you'll have to prepare a comfortable place for your frog to live. You have to do research on your specific type of frog in order to create a microenvironment suitable to its needs. A microenvironment is a small living space that simulates the frog's natural environment in nature. To do this, you'll need an aquarium, water, standard dirt, small plants, and a few rocks. It's important that your frogs have enough room to soak in the water or to relax on dry land. When feeding your frog, you'll have to be sure that you provide it with a balanced diet of live food. Tiny insects are best because they are easy for you to find at your local pet store. Remember, frogs are predators, so they will only eat live prey. Also, you'll need to keep your aquarium very clean. Amphibians have permeable skin through which both moisture and impurities are absorbed. So, if the water is dirty and filled with impurities, your frog will soon be dirty and filled with impurities. For the best results, you should ask your local pet store to learn about the needs of your specific frog.